word about throttle synchronization on small displacement, small Japanese engines. Now, I'm not talking about a VFR 800 or 750 or some Magna 1100, VT 1100 CF or some bike like that, where you got massive engines pulling massive flow across different carburetors in a V4 setting, or goodness gracious, a Valkyrie with 6 carburetors. Yeah, guys, okay, it's very critical to go back and synchronize all those. So before you flame me in the comments and say I don't know how to work on bikes because I said you don't have to synchronize your carburetors, listen to what I am saying and what I'm not saying. Those big engines need to be balanced. They need to be balanced well, because the signal strength of each individual cylinder is so significant that if they get out of whack, it's not going to run smooth. But I'm going to say this, and I'm going to stick to this because I've proved it true. I just won 9 #1 plates on these little 250s last year, so I know how to build them. When you're synchronizing the carburetors on a very small twin-cylinder Jap bike, like a Ninja 250, the EX250s, the Suzuki GS500s, just any number of Suzuki Bandit 400s, any of those little bikes. And all you need to do to synchronize them, all you got to do is when you put the carburetors on, make sure, and get these balanced to where I can hold them in the right spot. Make sure that they open and close at exactly the same time. See how the left and the right are both just cracking open, and that's totally shut on both of them. Just make sure they're both the same. Make sure one of them's not showing air or light through the crack when the other one doesn't. See how they're both showing a very slight little bit of airspace there in about an equal amount. That's all you got to do to sync these things. Okay? Once you open those throttle blades up and it's flowing air, even if one of them is 0.5% or 1% open more than the other one, with the amount of airflow and displacement you're dealing with, it doesn't matter. You're never going to know the difference. So just to synchronize these, this little setup screw right here is what adjusts them and makes one independent of the other. Okay, if you have this screw right here out of whack, then one of these could open before the other, and if one of those opens before the other, that's bad news. But if they're both opening at the same time and closing all the way at the same time, honestly, guys, that's all the synchronization you need on a small Jap bike like that. Okay. I do like to adjust a little bit of idle in when I first build them. Go ahead and adjust that in now. So you can see a little bit of a crack of light through both blades. That might be a little high, might idle a little bit high, especially when I first turn the choke on. But I can always kill the engine and turn it down. I didn't talk much about this little bypass thing for fuel bypass. This is so when you slam your throttle shut, say you're on the highway, you're cruising in 6th gear, doing 70 miles an hour, and you're just running that way for a long time, and then you snap the throttle shut to pull off the highway. Or you come up to a red light and snap the throttle shut and slam the brakes. These little displacement engines, even the big ones do too. The big ones do it too. They'll pop on decel. And that's because when you close the throttle, some fuel is still going to get into the engine, but it's not getting any air. So that unburned fuel can't mix and burn correctly, so it makes its way into the exhaust pipe. And technically speaking, it's an afterburn. It's not a misfire. Everybody calls it that because it sounds like that, but what it is, it's an afterburn. The fuel didn't burn in the cylinder, made its way to the exhaust pipe, and then after other fuel burning around it and got to it and ignited it in the pipe, you hear it pop out the muffler. So on my race bikes, I just get rid of these. I plug all these orifices up, seal them off. I don't run any filtration, and I just run open carburetors with huge giant jets and MR12 fuel. And with the other modifications I make, that's why I get 41, 42 horsepower out of a Ninja 250. On a street bike though, I don't want to roll up to a red light next to Granny turn the throttle off and have, you know, some big bang misfire go off next to Granny in the Hyundai. So, you know, for purposes of social conformity and, you know, being a nice guy or whatever, I went ahead and cleaned this up, made sure this diaphragm was working, so that if you slam the throttle shut, it's gonna do some bypassing and whatnot and try to keep it from afterburning. Is it necessary? No. You can plug it all up and not have it. Just when you slam your throttle shut, sometimes it might pop here and there. So, but that's the purpose of what that's for. A lot of guys have asked me questions of why that's there. A lot of bikes don't even have it. Usually you see it on V-twins and stuff like that. The Suzuki Savage single cylinders were notorious for having problems with these, where they were changing the different preloads on the springs to make the diaphragms work different and all kinds of stuff. Generally for racing, I just get rid of them. But on this street bike, I went ahead and cleaned it up, and diaphragm inside of it looks good. I'll just go ahead and let it do its job. The way to test these CVs, I'll shut up now and you can hear the air. If you hear the air pumping through, then that means you got a good vacuum on top of your caps, you know, for your slides. If you don't hear that air pumping through like that, and there's no resistance at all but the spring, and the spring's still going to push it, you know, up and down like that, but you don't feel any vacuum or any air resistance, then you got a hole in your diaphragm, and they won't work. That vacuum's got to be there. The air rushes across underneath of that slide. There's a little hole in the bottom of the slide. Vacuum pulls up through that hole, and those rubber diaphragms pull these slides up. So that has got to work right if you want a good running, you know, set of carbs. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and put these, well, first I gotta finish cleaning the jets and all, like we talked about. I'm gonna finish that, and then I'm gonna go ahead and get these things popped on. I got a new fuel valve for it. I showed you in the previous video that the fuel petcock valve wasn't functioning correctly. It was dripping fuel even in the running position when the engine was off and no vacuum applied, which is a big no-no. Your fuel valve must shut off either when you turn it off or when there's no engine vacuum applied in the on position if it's a vacuum operated diaphragm. If it doesn't, you have to replace it. Yes, it has to work. So I went ahead and just bought a brand new one. Not exactly sure what the OEM price is on this. I think it's probably about $100, give or take, you know. But this nice brand new one, it's got some kind of a Cosmoline lubricated lubricant inside of it to keep the valve fresh. And then in the off position, it won't flow anything ever. In the on position, it will flow when gasoline is high enough in the tank to enter that little screen filter, provided it has engine vacuum pulling on that nipple right there. And in the reserve position, it will flow all the way down to the bottom of the tank through this little filter screen here, again, provided it has vacuum. If the engine turns off and there's no vacuum, this thing shouldn't flow at all, ever, in any position. And a lot of people get confused by that. They see that word off, and they think that's the only time it's supposed to turn off. Well, it's also supposed to turn off in the on and reserve position when there's no vacuum applied, i.e. meaning the engine's not running. So that must work correctly. There's diaphragms and springs inside of this plate. And I could have pulled it apart and cleaned it up and got it working. I've done it 100 times. I could have. But for whatever I paid for this, you know, let's say I paid retail $100. I mean, for that little bit of money, is it really worth the 2 hours to rip it all apart and tinker with it and clean it up, put it back together? Maybe it doesn't work right the first time you do it, so you try it again and lubricate all the rubber with, you know, stuff and put it back. For $100, honestly, I just throw it on there and know it's new and know it's good and be done with it. But yeah, that's important to always have a good shutoff valve. And plus, I like the fact that there's nice new little filter screens on there. They'll only last 5 or 6 years, and then they'll deteriorate and go to junk. And then that's when I'm going to need my inline fuel filter that you don't see in the video right now, but somewhere on this bike I got a fuel hose with a nice filter on it, and that'll keep all the gook out. All right, guys, let's clean these jets up and put this back one last final time. I did this just now for the instruction of the video, but I'm going to go through and do that one more time and make sure everything's crystal clean, spotless, and I want to fire this thing up today.